The gentleman yields back. Mr. Moulton is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us here today. I'd actually like to start exactly where my colleague began with California High-Speed Rail. I understand the project is over budget. It's not a model for project completion. I understand there's a lot of frustration with it starting in the middle as opposed to starting at the end. But I have one very simple question for you. To meet 2050 travel demand in California, will it cost less taxpayer dollars or more taxpayer dollars to meet that with high-speed rail or by expanding highways and airports?
In my estimation, a highway and airport-only approach would cost more.
There's a lot of documentation and studies that show that too. So I agree with my colleague that this should be run more efficiently. I also think taxpayer dollars should get a good return on investment, a better return than they're getting today. And at the end of the day, we need to solve these transportation problems efficiently and in a 21st century way that uses taxpayer dollars more efficiently than just building more airports and highways where people can still sit on tarmac in thunderstorms, fight traffic on ever-congested highways, as opposed to going 200 miles per hour, 220 miles per hour like the rest of the world. So I hope we can pursue that more vigorously. Right now, of course, if you want to build an interstate highway, you get a ton of money from the federal government. If you want to build an airport, you get a ton of money from the federal government. We have a highway trust fund, we have an airport trust fund. We don't have any rail trust fund whatsoever. There's not even just a simple level playing field so that the famous American free market can make these business decisions about which mode is best. Because I'm sure there are places where high-speed rail doesn't make sense. It would cost more to solve a certain transportation problems. But in places where you get a better ROI, we should be choosing high-speed rail. That's not an option really for states today. What can we do to ensure proper federal funding to at least level the playing field so that transportation planners can just say, let's make an honest business-based decision about how to solve this congestion problem?
Thank you for the question. I think the key is to make sure we build on what we can demonstrate with the funding that we have now. What came in the IIJA was a step change in our ability to support passenger rail, but as you know, nowhere near what it will take to build a fully built-out U.S. high-speed rail network. I also am convinced, though, that when Americans experience high-speed rail and revenue service on U.S. soil, there will be no going back. That's part of why it's so important to effectively deliver those projects now underway, California and Brightline.
Well, I've made this point to you since before you were sworn in. It's proven internationally. A ton of resistance to building the first high-speed rail line in Spain. Tentacles from Madrid, all the provinces said as soon as Barcelona got their line, every other province wanted one too. And the Spanish government has made business-based decisions about where high-speed rail makes sense. They now have a national network. I think we need to look at that very carefully. Now, while this hearing was happening, there was a 20-car Canadian National derailment outside of Chicago, including some hazmat cars in Madison, Illinois. It's clear that we can make more progress on freight rail safety. And I think we need some bipartisan legislation that will not take us back to the 1950s, but move us forward, push the industry forward to hopefully not only improve safety, but improve reliability and service as well. How do we develop freight rail legislation that doesn't just push more traffic onto trucks? Because we want our railways to be safer, but we don't want them to not be used, because even in the horrific derailment in East Palestine, exactly 0 people were killed. Every week on the highways, people die in hazmat accidents because that traffic is on trucks and not on trains.
You make an incredibly important point, which is that pound for pound, rail transport is safer and less polluting than alternatives. Of course, trucks play a vitally important role, but in terms of making sure that we fully use our rail networks, there's a benefit to that many times over in congestion, air quality, emissions, and safety. So that means we have to do, I think, a couple of things. First of all, ensure the safety of freight rail, and I think that the bipartisan legislation being considered in this chamber would help with that. And secondly, I think that the companies need to invest in capacity. Unfortunately, under the so-called precision scheduled railroading approach, leaders of those Class 1 freight railroads are under pressure to extract as much value as they can out of their railroads without really investing in capacity.
I agree with you, Mr. Secretary. I'm almost out of time. I just want to extend this point to passenger rail as well. When we spend billions of dollars subsidizing people to get into more cars as an inevitable result of the EV policy, then we're going to have more congestion on our highways. We're going to have a lot of silent traffic jams, but there's still going to be traffic jams. We've got to level the playing field and make sure Americans have the choices, the freedom to travel at 200 miles per hour like the rest of the world. Thank you. I yield back.